it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Prepare yourselves, perceptive populists, for the post-apocalyptic pop culture pop-up cafe, where we'll ponder how popular culture impacts the population. Our premier panelist, Sean Pendergrass, will probe how precisely primetime programming portrays pandemics. Then the profoundly poignant Jasmine Lee will present a potent perspective on how published pieces portray the preternaturally postmortal. Finally, prolific Professor Athena Actopus will present her parody production of Meta-Conspiracy, potentially piercing the peel on peculiar political patterns, or perhaps providing another perplexing perspective on our public predicaments. First, a question for the audience. What do you want to pick apart about pop culture and the unperished? Post your thoughts in the chat, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Let's welcome our pop-up cafe co-host, Dave Lundberg-Kenrick. Dave, we're talking about zombies in pop culture today. What are your favorite examples of pop culture zombies?
Let's see. For me, I'm pretty excited about this Resident Evil remake. I'm always a big Resident Evil fan. And then, you know, the Last of Us show has always been a good one. What about you, Garrett? Do you have favorites?
I would have to say probably World War Z with Brad Pitt. That was a pretty good movie to me.
So, yeah, what does it say about popular culture? Or should we let our panelists decide?
Okay.
Yeah, well, and also here we are in the Apocalypse Pop-Up Cafe. We have never been in this location, and I have to say I'm a little worried we might not be quite as safe as you are in the bunker there, Garrett.
Yeah, but Garrett, you know, missing out on all this luxury.
Yeah, you've got cookies and juice.
I don't know. I feel very safe here in this particular. Those zombies can touch me in this way. So, and at the end of the show, Athena has a special performance for us.
I do.
Sean is a microbiology student in the Science of Zombification class, here to discuss how shows like HBO's The Last of Us differ from the way a cordyceps infection would happen in real life. So, how is the infection presented in The Last of Us, Sean?
First of all, spoilers for the first 3 episodes of the season. So in the show The Last of Us by HBO Max, it presents a world where the cordyceps fungus has mutated to infect humans and do so because of climate change in the last 20 or so years. And the show takes place in Texas, where the protagonist, Joe, Ellie, and some supporting cast survive the apocalypse pretty much. And in the show, the infection starts out by a grain factory or grain processing in Indonesia gone wrong with some yield infected with cordyceps and infected some workers. And because the grain was made into flour that was transported across the world, started an infection once people began to eat a certain amount of it.
Wow, that sounds like a lot I need to catch up on. So, yeah. It's an accurate representation of, the zombie stuff.
The show does try to paint itself as more of like a realistic version of how this would happen. However, the show only mentions how climate change could basically lead to the fact that the fungus could adapt to more human-like temperatures. What the show doesn't bring up in the fact is how different physiologically pretty much everything is between the host, the ants, and humans. First and foremost, the humans are a lot larger than ants and would take a lot longer to basically do the entire process. And because of that, the adaptive immune system, which is not actually in ants because they're invertebrates, would actually take into effect and more or less prevent it from actually reaching critical mass.
So can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So what happens when in real life with cordyceps and ants?
So a basic rundown is a spore from another cordyceps ant lands on ant, basically differentiates into certain kinds of cells that pierce the cuticle, go into the blood, and once in there, it starts to basically grow until it reaches somewhere around like 50% of the mass. And around there, kind of
50% of the mass of the ant?
yes, 50% of the mass of the ant.
Oh.
And around there, it starts to secrete chemicals to, first of all, like evade the immune system. Some of it's cytotoxic and basically cause the ant to act very awkward, mess with its biological clock, its nervous system, and cause it to leave the colony around noonish, goes about, like climbs a leaf, bites down, and at that point, the fungus basically quickly grows all over the ant, produces spores, and the infection process continues all over again.
So no, but you think would be better equipped to not have this happen to us?
Yes. Like I said before, we are a lot larger than ants. They don't have an adaptive immune system. And while the ants do have an immune system, it is analogous. And so the chemicals will either not work as effectively in the humans or just not work, period.
So why does our size, why would that make it harder for them to take us over?
Because like it has to reach a certain critical mass to be able to like basically control, like,
to control our minds?
not exactly like grow over all the muscles, the tissue, and all that, and start to grow.
Oh, so now
To overwhelm us.
Yeah.
overwhelm us. So do we carry around cordyceps fungus in us in real life, like in smaller amounts?
Actually, you can, because nowadays there are like traditional Chinese medicines where a species of cordyceps called cordyceps sinensis, it basically infects a caterpillar near the Himalayas or that kind of region. And when you eat the fruiting bodies or the mycelium, it's basically a medicine, more or less.
I actually consumed some beer with cordyceps added to it this weekend.
Really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a zombie dust beer with a tincture of cordyceps added to it because the zombie beer wasn't quite enough for me, you know.
So now it doesn't have any sort of impact on us to have these small.
I actually should have probably done some more research before I was like, yeah, throw that in. That's cool. I'll have some cordyceps.
So do you know, Sean?
It's kind of kin, like it's recommended, you know, take care if you're pregnant, all that kind of stuff, but like it might cause, I don't know, it's not really that well studied. Well, it is, yeah.
Let's let Rick jump in.
So I just wanted to add something that I've heard before, but it's like fungus is harder for the human body to fight off because of our immune system's not necessarily built to fight fungus necessarily because it's the larger parasite than bacteria or virus. Do you think that could affect how it spreads between humans? Because I know that fungus also has a depression system on the human immune system, and that's why people think that allergies are on the rise because we have less parasites overall.
Sorry, you said depression?
Like
Depressive effect.
Oh,
it's a
okay, yeah.
depressive effect on the immune system,
Immunosuppressive,
so it
yeah.
doesn't fight back as hard, and that's why people that when we had more, parasites, like tapeworm or ringworm or anything like that, it was actually helpful for our immune system for allergies wise because that way it wasn't overactive. Do you think that could play a part into the cordyceps infection in The Last of Us?
Possibly, like, they do secrete immunosuppressive agents, and if it was to very, very unlikely actually do all this kind of stuff, it probably would. And how, I wouldn't say that the immune system doesn't deal with the fungus very well. It's our way to help the immune system. So basically, because we are closer to fungus than either bacteria or viruses, So drugs that target fungus also can very well easily target our own cells, which is not supposed to. You don't want that.
So it'd be hard to fight back against a fungal infection like this if it were to be real.
Like drugs would be less effective, but
Just overall, it sounds like
Yeah.
our immune system and drugs would be less effective because there's higher risk of trying to get rid of something so large and so similar to us
again,
in
like,
terms of like, you know,
yeah, but it has to meet like it has somehow has to overcome an adaptive immune system which never has encountered before. And all that. It just if it did happen, probably, but very, very, very unlikely in my opinion.
Okay. Well, very interesting stuff. Hate to interject, but we're going to move on to our next guest, Jasmine Lee, where she's going to talk about zombies in literature. So, Jasmine, what are some examples of zombies in literature?
So I've read a lot more of modern fiction about zombies than like classic literature. I mean, there's always Frankenstein, and you can talk for days about stuff like that, right? But one of the books that I read a little while ago, I think got a television adaptation, so of course spoilers for the series, was The Girl with All the Gifts. And from what I recall about it, it was a very interesting piece because it didn't focus so much on the outbreak and the scientific aspects of it, which that's fine. But it sort of focused on the aftermath of the pandemic. And after you get people like, say, Ellie in The Last of Us, where you have coexisting mutualistic relationships with this fungus or this outbreak that's happened, what happens next? And what that book kind of showed was that these new zombies, quote unquote, basically took over the world after the initial societal collapse. Similar premise to the Last of Us TV show. The global warming kind of made it a lot easier for fungus to spread worldwide, and eventually there were just so many spores everywhere that there wasn't much people could do about it. So near the end of the book, the very last uninfected people are living in the far north mountains. It's the only place they can really get to that isn't going to kill them. And these new people, these zombies who are coexisting with the fungus that they're infected with, have taken over the earth and basically travel up to offer like peace offerings, like, hey, we're not trying to harm you, and we just want to coexist peacefully, which I think is very poignant metaphor for humanity through zombies.
So can I ask you a question? Because I've never seen the show. Does the infection have any sort of behavioral effects on the infected?
Yeah, I think that it's fairly classic zombie stuff. So I think it was the cordyceps fungus, but there's the very classic gnashing of teeth, going and attacking people. I think there was some like sense for when there were people of like a certain temperature around, like you were able to better detect other humans or animals, so you could go and like feed on them, I'm guessing.
Okay. So now when they're offering peace, like they're at a place where they could like stick to that.
So I think that there's kind of the clear dividing line between the zombies who are, I guess, infected, zombies, if we want to call them zombies, who are living mutualistically with this parasite or this fungus.
Okay.
And those are the people who are able to act rationally and think and essentially inherit this world that's been destroyed.
Okay, so they're sort of like less symptomatic in terms of the behavioral symptoms.
Definitely.
I see. Interesting. So what do you think it's saying about the world?
I think despite the sort of apocalyptic tone of the series, it's a pretty hopeful message, because what I get from it is even if we do manage to ruin everything, there's always going to be something next. Whether that be us or not, there will be something else later. And I mean, maybe that's not terribly hopeful for humans, but...
But also, it raises an interesting question for sort of me as an individual, right? Because I'm like, well, if the humanity carries on, but then not me, then I guess that's fine. So,
So we have people comparing the movie and the book. How would you say those two compare?
I don't actually know. I only realized that there was a television series or a movie adaptation of the book when I saw like the cover of one of them that was like now adapted, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I never watched the movie because I have trouble watching movies after I've read the books because I always judge them very critically.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
How are zombies used as a metaphor though for like societal problems? I'm pretty sure you kind of just touched on this, but if you could like elaborate just a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. I think that definitely the infected people, the kind of classic zombies in this would be people who are basically symptomatic of a lot of society's problems. Like it could be used as an allegory for technological addiction of any kind, really, or just kind of the erosion that comes from late stage capitalism and political dissonance that we're seeing a lot of today. So just kind of a lot of those factors that are making things hard to cope with or get by, and the erosion of society as a whole. Whereas the other or mutualistically coexisting are, in a sense, the cure for that sort of thing. It's adapting to those problems and solving them in new ways, or basically getting to the point where those things are no longer a problem for people.
is the moral that even though late stage capitalism is killing me, it's really good for the capitalists, and so I should just let them enjoy the world?
Maybe.
Interesting. So, what do you guys think about, maybe not even just in that show, but in sort of symbolism in The Last of Us and World War Z?
Intense. I mean, it sounds like the story you're talking about is just a continuation almost of The Last of Us.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a
like
very
reaching the end
classic
point.
story.
Yeah.
Well, classic in the sense of like it's very characteristic of the genre. I think it's accessible to a lot of people, like The Last of Us is too, because at this point, I feel like a lot of people know that cordyceps are a fungus that infect ants and they parasitize them. So what if that happened to humans? And that's the basic premise for a lot of these stories. And it's just the different kinds of speculation that get us to different places. Because I think The Last of Us also brings in a very human element to their zombies as well, especially with Ellie. But they do also play a lot with the monstrous nature of the people who have been infected beyond no return. And that I think in part is because it started as a video game, which that definitely affects things. It's like Resident Evil, like you said, Dave, where they're definitely very monstrous. Because I'm quite a fan of the Resi remakes they're doing.
Right. I mean, yeah, the Resident Evil zombies. I know when I'm playing that game, I'm always like, man, they really did not make any effort to make me feel bad about like the fact that I'm basically murdering a village full of people. But
they do their best to make them barely human, if at all.
yeah.
So the story they're talking about, is it more like Warm Bodies? I see that we had a comment on there. Any positive spins? And the one that I think of is like Warm Bodies, where they're still sentient underneath, and they're still like there's like two separate parts of it. It sounds like that's almost kind of what you're describing. Whereas like one part is they're infected, but not with maybe the same strain, and they're still in control somewhat. And then there's more infected that probably aren't or something.
Yeah, I think the positive spin we get is where basically you get the two coexisting. So it's not a parasite anymore. It's a mutualistic symbiotic organism. But yeah, I think what the positive thing is when it becomes basically normalized, when that's the majority. And it's no longer a thing that's to be feared because, well, if you're already infected, you're immune anyway, regardless of how you're infected. unless something evolves to the point where it can infect you again. But that's a different issue.
Yeah, the whole cooperation angle, I think, is really interesting too, right? Because sometimes, like in The Last of Us, in the in the show, at least, I haven't played the video game, but the individuals who are infected, they're highly cooperative. They have like unbelievable communication, and that's part of what makes them so terrifying, right? So we kind of think of like, oh, cooperation is a good thing, but cooperation can also, be used in ways that we think of as bad for us or for the, individuals who are trying to survive, right? So it's complicated.
Right. I mean, I always personally think that the question that The Last of Us always asks is, well, what do I care about society if society is willing to let my family die, right? Like, I think that's basically the setup. And so, yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think that's I feel like that's a question that often comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I do have one question, or technically two. So, Jasmine, I think you mentioned Frankenstein at the beginning. Would you classify him as a zombie?
It depends on how broad of a definition that we're using, but I'd say for these purposes, yeah, sure.
Okay, because my second question kind of revolves around that, which is like, where do you think the change switched from like Frankenstein to The Last of Us?
I think that's actually a really good question. It delves a lot into the history of literature because Mary Shelley was actually a revolutionary in her time. No one had written something like Frankenstein before that. So I think she's actually probably one of the progenitors of the idea of a living dead. And this actually got mentioned in the Science of Zombification class, which I didn't realize, but the whole thing of zombies eating brains came from The Simpsons, I guess. I think that's what you said, Athena, right?
Did I say that?
I thought that's what you said.
They were eating brains before The Simpsons.
Were they?
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
I said that.
Well, I was entirely wrong.
Maybe somebody else from class said it. Though.
Maybe.
Well, whoever it was.
But the point I'm roundaboutly making my way to is I think it's probably evolved over the course of the history of media as a whole. Of course, books at the start, and probably Mary Shelley as one of the pathfinders for that sort of thing. But I think as more and more people latched onto this concept of the living dead and thought, like, what can we do with this? It became more and more popular, and more people started running with that. Like, the classic zombie today is very much it's the living dead. It eats brains. They're remarkably strong, and a lot of the time they're slow. But a lot of these concepts can be traced to stuff like, well, the Romero movies, or say like the brain eating thing came from somewhere. I don't know where actually, but it came from somewhere, because we're also starting to see, as people try to incorporate more realistic elements into their zombie fiction, I guess, just like zombies eating things. Like, what's scarier than something trying to eat your brain? The idea of unending consumption.
Okay.
I actually had something I wanted to add, if that was possible. So I know this tidbit about Mary Shelley, and it's basically Mary Shelley was more likely influenced by this person named Giovanni Aldini, which basically was a guy who tried to reanimate human bodies using electricity, and was one of like the first forefounders of it. And it was basically like, it was a very stormy weekend or something, and Mary Shelley went off with some friends, and that's when she wrote Frankenstein, because it was competition between her friends. But
it was actually an apocalypse. There was a volcanic eruption, and it caused
it was like a major winter, basically,
like a winter that lasted for months or something crazy.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting to think that the reason why zombies come into being from like Frankenstein is because of science in that thing, or in that type of area. But it was also during a time period where it being experimented on after you dead was actually worse and scarier than dying for like inmates on death row. Interesting. So that's just the only thing I wanted to add to that.
Well, thank you for that. We're now going to bring in our prolific professor, Miss Athena Actipus, to perform a song for us. So, passing over to Athena.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you this parody that I wrote. It's called Meta Conspiracy, and it's to the tune of of Radiohead's Creep. And I invite everybody to sing along for the chorus if you like. So, yeah. I know about the lizards taking over the world. I know they're having parties at Bohemian Grove. I know about the chemtrails. I know about new coal. I know something special. Yeah, so fucking special. 'Cause I'm no sheep. I do my research, and the picture's really clear. Just connect the lines here. You think you know the truth. I think your nose in control. 'Cause you heard a perfect story. Came from a perfect troll. It says everybody who don't look like me is not something special, but I'm fucking special. 'Cause I'm no sheep. I do my research, and the picture is really clear. Just connect the lines, dear. Whatever makes you question what's real and what's not. Whatever drives the stake deeper between the haves and have-nots. Yeah, these stories divide us. Who stands to gain? Yeah, you figured me out now. You know what I think now. It's a conspiracy. The conspiracy theories. They're a conspiracy themselves. They're a plot to divide us. A meta-conspiracy. I don't know where they come from, but probably China or Russia. They're gonna take us down. They're gonna disarm us. So don't stay asleep. Do actual research. You'll see the picture's really clear. Can't pull the wool over our eyes. So don't believe their lies. It's a meta-conspiracy. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. You have to let me know when that comes out on SoundCloud. Sure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Be sure to click on that subscribe button for Zombified Media. And be sure to like this video and comment below if you have anything you want to see us talk about on Channel Z. See you next week.
Oh. Next week, you're gonna get to see more of who's presenting next week.
We have a show, a special student show.
Special student show, right?
Yeah.
We've got Crystal, right? Your
Maybe.
stuff, maybe, and are you guys?
Maybe. Yeah, I think we're gonna film sometime this either upcoming week or yeah.
Yeah. So tune in to see what happens between this week and next week.
Yeah, and remember, the best way to protect yourself and protect your brains in the zombie apocalypse is to share those brains. So keep those brains on offer for everyone, and join us next time here on Undead Live, where we have the apocalypse covered.
And if the whole world says that we're cool,